Breaking news! Russian soldiers surrendered to Ukrainian troops with a white flag sticking out from their T-90A tank. But what the hell exactly happened in that moment? What was the final objective of all this? What did the armed forces of both countries say? Stay until the end to learn everything about this situation and what the president of Ukraine had to say about it. Subscribe if you're in favor of Ukraine winning this war once and for all. In the early hours of September 2, 2025, a T-90A tank of the Russian 4th Armored Brigade surrendered to Ukrainian soldiers without a single shot being fired. On a little-used stretch of road south of Avdiivka, Russian and Ukrainian troops were locked in a contest of endurance and strategy. From camouflaged positions on hills and trenches, both sides exchanged bursts of machine gun fire and indirect support fire, attempting to gain ground and pin down the enemy. The thunder of projectiles blended with the crunch of earth under advancing infantry and the rumble of T-90A tanks alongside Ukrainian BMP fighting vehicles. The vehicle, fitted with Contact 5 reactive armor and a 125mm gun with a stabilized fire control system, was moving along a secondary road south of Avdiivka, Ukraine, when the commander decided to lower the hatch and raise a white cloth in the air. What followed was a series of protocol gestures. The crew threw their intact anti-armor ammunition to the roadside, shut down the engine, and pulled back the turret curtains to show their empty hands. That surrender, without conditions or exchange of fire, was captured on camera, and the news spread like wildfire on both sides. The operation leading to the surrender was based on an electronic blockade maneuver. Ukrainian units neutralized the tank's communications with a focused jamming pulse targeting the command and control frequencies used by the crew. Without radio or data link, the T-90A commander realized there was no way to request support or evacuate casualties. At the same time, a low ammunition alert blinked on the gunner's sight indicator. Fewer than 10 anti-armor rounds remained. The tension between the risk of staying isolated and the impossibility of retreat led the commander to make the most drastic decision: surrender, in order to preserve the lives of his men. Information gathered by the Ukrainian General Staff pointed to several factors that precipitated the T-90A surrender. First, a shortage of spare parts had reduced the efficiency of the auxiliary cooling system, raising interior temperatures above 50 degrees Celsius during previous operations and affecting both electronics and crew morale. Second, the fuel supply had been interrupted after tanker trains were diverted to more protected sectors, leaving the tank with an estimated range of only 15 kilometers and no chance of refueling. Third, the physical exhaustion of the crew, who had gone more than 48 hours without rotation or rest under constant noise and tension, drained their resilience. Facing that combination of isolation, lack of resources, and extreme fatigue, surrender emerged as the only viable way out. As soon as the news broke, the president of Ukraine issued an official statement. The peaceful surrender of this T-90A tank confirms the effectiveness of our defenses and the determination of our soldiers. We have shown that it is possible to neutralize heavy equipment without firing a single projectile, preserving lives and strengthening our intelligence capacity. That same day, the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense added that the Russian crew would be treated in accordance with the Geneva Convention, receive medical care, and be transferred to a prisoner of war center in Lviv, where they would be given basic humanitarian assistance and registered as captured combatants. From Moscow, the official reaction came via the spokesman of the Russian Federation's Ministry of Defense, who described the episode as a staged act of propaganda by Kiev. Our troops maintain their honor and combat capacity intact. In internal communications sent to armored units, the Russian High Command ordered reinforcements of escorts with short and medium-range anti-drone systems, updates to electronic warfare protocols to minimize interference, and relocation of spare parts and fuel supplies to areas safe from enemy tactics. They also mandated the creation of rapid recovery teams for disabled armored vehicles, capable of arriving in under 2 hours to prevent spontaneous surrenders. In the hours that followed, the International Committee of the Red Cross issued a note reminding both sides of their obligations regarding the treatment of prisoners of war and requested security guarantees for the captured crew. The Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights also expressed its interest in overseeing detention conditions and verifying compliance with international standards. Diplomatic sources indicated that the European Union was considering imposing new sanctions on Moscow should violations of international humanitarian law occur during the detention or transfer of the soldiers. In Kiev, the General Staff planned a protocol for handling the prisoners. First, a technical interrogation would extract data on the T-90A's operational status, maintenance cycles, and possible factory or usage defects. Second, the military neuropsychology department was reinforced to evaluate the prisoner's mental state, detect signs of extreme fatigue or PTSD, and provide psychological support. Third, in a gesture of transparency, it was agreed to allow visits from Red Cross delegations and a select group of accredited journalists to document detention conditions, thereby bolstering Ukraine's international credibility. But this was not the only time soldiers surrendered. In March 2024, a Russian motorized company of 58 soldiers was trapped on a small island on the right bank of the Dnipro near Avdiivka, after a combined Ukrainian naval and electronic warfare operation. During the night, 4 drone boats cut the floating bridge that the Russians had just built with metal beams and rubber pontoons, while TR-13 jamming pulses blinded their tactical radios and night vision systems. The thermometer read -4 degrees Celsius with humidity over 90%, causing condensation on sights and blockages in semi-automatic weapons, drastically reducing their firepower. As rations ran out and several cases of mild hypothermia appeared, Lieutenant Colonel Alexei Kennedy Makarov ordered a makeshift white poncho hoisted on his BMP-97 turret, AK-74 rifles laid down in a clearing by the riverbank, and waited for an escort to cross under Ukrainian supervision. The Russian response was immediate. Orders to reinforce river routes and protect floating bridges with short-range anti-drone systems, such as low-power laser cannons and portable jammers. In Moscow, protocols on rotation and lack of contingency gear were questioned. A rapid recovery team with amphibious trucks and heavy-lift helicopters was created to rescue isolated units in under 2 hours. Naval patrols were increased, and jammer beacons were installed on riverbanks to emit denial pulses at 2.4 GHz and 5.8 GHz, safeguarding landing craft communications. Internally, High Command mandated extended winter survival training and validated the use of quantum satellite radios as backups against EW disruptions. In Kyiv, the president publicly praised the combined effectiveness of naval engineers and EW operators, and the Ministry of Defense announced the creation of specialized riverine units for electronic countermeasures and drone-based amphibious operations. The incident became a case study at the Joint Center for Non-Lethal Operations, where NATO officers labeled the surrender the first documented example of selective electronic surrender in a modern conflict. Military academies in Poland, Sweden, and Germany integrated modules on electronic psychological pressure into their curricula, preparing exercises where troops must isolate and capture armored units without firing, using link blockages, cyber attacks, and logistical attrition as strategic weapons. Returning to the recent surrender of these Russian soldiers, the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense also announced its intention to use the incident as a deterrent tool. A documentary video was planned to recount the operation step by step, highlighting the use of electronic warfare, intelligence coordination, and the to isolate an armored vehicle without lethal force. This material would be distributed on social media and international news channels, subtitled in several languages, to show the world that Ukraine's defensive strategy combines cutting-edge technology with respect for humanitarian law. In the Ukrainian parliament, lawmakers discussed official recognition for the soldiers involved in the operation, with the awarding of merit medals and honorary mentions. The chairman of the Defense Committee even suggested creating a voluntary surrender day as a reminder that modern war is not only won with military power, but also with intelligence and control of information. That idea, though criticized by some deputies as propagandistic, advanced through a first committee vote. Beyond politics, military analysts began studying the impact on Russian troop morale. According to intelligence leaks from Ukraine, in the 72 hours following the incident, Formal requests for withdrawal or rest increased by 15% in armored units near Avdiivka. At the same time, Russian social media channels linked to official news outlets saw a rise in internal warning messages, urging troops not to repeat tactical mistakes, and reminding them that war requires preparation, not improvisation. The episode also sparked intense debate in the international defense community over the ethics and limits of using electronic warfare and wired drones as non-lethal neutralization tools. Until then, most military doctrines had focused on armor penetration and missile lethality, but the surrender of a T-90A without a single shot fired introduced a new paradigm. If an advanced tank can be forced to capitulate through electromagnetic pulses and fiber optic cables, why not integrate these capabilities into the standard operating procedures of armed forces? A NATO working group, meeting in June 2025 at the Electronic Warfare Center of Excellence in Kaunas, Lithuania, published a preliminary report highlighting 3 critical areas. Revision of rules of engagement. Experts noted that current ROE define use of force almost exclusively in kinetic terms. Communication blockages and selective jamming raise the need for specific rules. Should they be considered hostile acts equivalent to firing a weapon? Or are they part of area denial operations? The report suggests adding clauses regulating interference thresholds, requiring politico-military authorization, and ensuring transparency with allies and humanitarian organizations. Technological countermeasures. Countries like Germany and France have already announced plans to invest in jamming-resistant quantum communications and redundant hybrid links, radio plus optical plus military cellular. NATO's document recommends speeding up the deployment of early interference detection systems, auto-reconfiguring frequency modules, and off-band backup protocols. It also suggests forming EW response teams in each armored unit, tasked with restoring links and protecting command systems at the first sign of jamming. Legal framework updates. Military lawyers convened in The Hague and Geneva to discuss whether electronic pulses fit the definition of means and methods of warfare under IHL international humanitarian law. Some delegations argued that electronic neutralization should be treated as a form of area control, subject to the same civilian protection restrictions as kinetic operations. Others warned that subjecting these techniques to overly rigid rules could stifle tactical innovation. Beyond NATO, the EU tasked the European Defence Agency with a study on non-lethal surrender operations. This analysis, to conclude in December 2025, will evaluate the impact of electronic warfare in urban settings, its compatibility with civilian communication networks, and the risks of technological collateral damage, critical infrastructure disruptions, risks to medical emergencies. Meanwhile, war colleges in Poland and Sweden have already included modules on electronic psychological pressure, integrating simulations of isolated armored units, logistical exhaustion, and visual evidence of surrender. Young officers now train in combined exercises where, instead of destroying a target, they must convince its crew to wave the white flag through EW maneuvers, information pressure, and rationing strategies. This doctrinal shift, triggered by the T-90A surrender, marks the beginning of a race to perfect hybrid warfare techniques that minimize human casualties and destroyed equipment, but maximize the degradation of combat will. The ultimate goal of the Ukrainian operation, according to general staff sources, was not just to capture the T-90A, but to demonstrate the viability of neutralizing armored units through attrition, isolation, and psychological pressure. Keeping the vehicle's fire control systems and electronic logs intact allowed Kyiv to calibrate specific counter-jamming software for T-90A and T-90M models, reducing their effectiveness in sectors where they still operate. That intelligence value, estimated at several $1 million, far outweighs the cost of acquiring or repairing a single tank. Maintenance of the captured tank began in a specialized workshop in Lviv, where Ukrainian engineers and 2 captured Russian officers, acting as formal advisors under supervision, inspected every component. They documented factory flaws, assembly issues in track rollers, and deficiencies in the insulating coating of fire control modules. This limited cooperation between prisoners and technicians allowed Ukraine to compile a detailed dossier already circulating among NATO headquarters as a reference on vulnerabilities of the T-90 family. In conclusion, the surrender of the T-90A tank on September 2, 2025, became an event of major strategic, political, and media significance. It demonstrated that in today's battlefield, victory depends as much on the ability to degrade the enemy's potential without firing as it does on recording and broadcasting the exact moment of surrender. What do you think about this act by the Russian soldiers? Should they have kept fighting with the few resources they had, or were they right to surrender? Let me know in the comments.